Okay, we're going to go ahead and review some rules for adding real numbers. And so this could be adding positive numbers, negative numbers, decimal numbers, fractions. And I'm going to give you examples using a variety of ways. Now, we are going to address certain situations. So the first one is going to be when you have a positive number plus a positive number. So for instance, if we had 4 plus 9, we're going to just add those two and we get 13. If we have a decimal problem, 1 and 5/10 plus 3 and 2/10. Okay, if I add those together, they're both positive, I'm going to add them together. Looks like I'm going to have 4 and 7/10. If I were working with fractions, and in this case I'm just going to use fractions that have the same denominator so we don't have to mess with finding a common denominator first. We're just going to add these two. Remember, when you're adding fractions, you're just going to add the numerators when the denominators are the same. So that will give us 2/3. So in all of these situations, when we add a positive with another positive, our answer is going to be a positive number. Okay? So we want to add, and the answer, or the sum, is positive. Okay, that's the first situation that or possible problem that you're going to come across. Another is when you have a positive number plus a negative number. Now, there are three situations here. In one case, your answer is going to be a positive. In the second case, your answer is going to be a negative. And in the third case, your answer will be 0. So I'm going to give you examples for all three of those positive plus negative type problems. And one other thing I want to mention is that notice I have the positive first. We could very likely have the negative first and then the positive, after the addition sign. Because of commutative property, I can do that. Order doesn't matter. But anyway, I'm just going to go and list it as positive plus negative. So in this first example, our answer is going to give us a positive number. Okay, so let's say we have 7 plus negative 3. So 7 plus negative 3. I have 7. I'm going to take away 3. I'm going to have 4 left over. With decimals, 1 and 5/10 plus a negative 7/10, we're going to have 8/10 left over. With fractions, we might have 3/4, and we're going to add to that a negative of 1/4. And so that's going to leave us 2/4, and of course we can reduce to 1/2. Now notice our answers are smaller than the numbers that we're starting with, the positive numbers. What's happening here is we're actually subtracting. So 7 minus 3 gives us 4. 1 and 5/10 minus negative 7/10 gives us our answer. 3/4 minus 1/4. So to figure out a problem in which you have a positive and a negative, you always want to subtract or find the difference. Now the answer is going to take the sign of the larger number. So for instance, notice this 4 is a positive 4 because the larger number out of 7 or 3 7 is a larger number, and it's a positive. Same over here, 1.5 is larger than 0.7. 3/4 is larger than 1/4. So the answer takes the sign of the larger number. Now I said earlier that we're going to have 3 possible scenarios when you're dealing with positive added to a negative or negative added to a positive. So let's look at another situation. In this case, we're going to get a negative. So let's throw in some numbers. Let's say we have 16 plus negative 20. Well, again, like before, I'm going to subtract. So 20 take away 16 is going to give me 4. The larger number is a negative, so it's a negative 4. Let's try 3 2/10 plus negative 3 3/10. The difference between the two numbers is going to be 1/10. Now the higher number, or the bigger number, is the 3 3/10. So it's going to be a negative 1/10. And with fractions, let's say we've got 1/2 plus a negative 3/4. Now 1/2, we can convert that to 2/4. So I'll go ahead and cross that out and go 2/4. 2/4. Again, we're going to subtract 3/4, take away 2/4 is going to be 1/4. 3/4 is larger than 2/4, so it's going to be a negative 1/4. And again, we're subtracting, and the answer takes the sign of the larger number. So it's really the same rule as this one that we just did up here. But in this case, the larger numbers in all these examples were negative numbers. So our answers have to reflect that. They're going to be negative numbers. And like I said, there's 3 options for these positive plus negative scenarios. And that third one is when you have positive number plus a negative, and it's going to equal 0. So say you have 5, and what we're basically doing is we're going to add the opposite of positive 5. So that's going to be add negative 5. Okay. Now, when we have 5 plus a negative 5, that's going to give us a 0. And if you're not sure, we could, just sketch a little number line here. That's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I'm going to go out to 5, okay, that's plus 5. But then I'm going to go back 5. So that's going to put me over here, so that's negative 5. So it takes me back home to 0. So let's do a couple more. Let's say we've got 2 5/10 plus the negative or the opposite of positive 2 5/10. Again, that's going to give me 0. And if we had, say, 1/5 plus a negative 1/5, again, that's going to give me, whoops, sorry, you missed all that. Let me go back and talk about this since you missed it. Positive plus a negative equals 0, and I drew a little number line here so you could see it. We're going to go from 0 to 5, and then we're going to subtract 5. That takes us back to 0. And then I just wrote out some additional problems, 2 5/10 plus the opposite of 2 5/10, which is a negative 2 5/10. and then that gives me 0. Same with the fraction, 1/5 plus the negative of 1/5. Now, there is one other situation, and that's when you have two negatives. And when you are adding two negatives, your answer is going to be a negative. So let me write it this way. So negative plus a negative equals a negative. And that's number 5. Yeah, number 5. Okay, so some examples. Let's say we've got negative 5 plus negative 10. Okay, and really how you can think of this is in terms of money. You know, I owe $5, and then you have another debt of $10. So what is your total debt? Well, you now owe $15. Okay. With decimals, we could have negative 1 2/10 plus a negative 8/10. That's going to give us a total negative of 2. Let's say we have a negative 7/8 plus a negative 3/8. Okay, so we're just adding the numerators. Okay, the denominators are the same, so we're just going to add the numerators. That's going to give us negative 10/8. Now this is improper, so we should always convert to a mixed number. 8 goes into 10 once with 2 left over. And remember, that's negative. Now 2 8s we can reduce to 1/4. So negative 1 1/4. I think so really, let's go backtrack here. So what we're doing here is we're going to basically add. We're adding the negatives. And the answer is negative. We're combining our debts to one big debt, and so that answer has to reflect that debt. It's going to be a negative number. Now, in class, we also talk about combining lots of positive and negative numbers in one problem. And so I'm going to go through an example. Let me zoom out here a little bit so we have more visual space here. Okay, now we're going to use a couple of properties when we're trying to figure out the answer. And, you know, try it this way. You can certainly always revert back to order of operations. And I'll fill you in on that in just a minute. Let me write down the problem. So we got 27 plus negative 4 plus 13 plus 5 plus negative 9. Notice we're adding all these numbers, but we've got some positive numbers and then we've got some negative numbers. Okay. Now, like I said earlier, you could just do order of operations, and that's basically when you've got add and subtract, you just go from left to right. So you would go 27 plus a negative 4, figure that out, then add 13, figure that out, then add 5, figure that out, then basically subtract 9, and then you'd come up with your answer. There's another way that is kind of an introduction to what we're going to be doing in the future when we're simplifying expressions. So, I'd like you to give this method a shot because we're going to revisit it again later. So we're going to use two properties. The first one is called commutative. Commutative property of addition. And basically that means order does not matter when you're adding. So, you could add 2 plus 3 plus 4, or you could add 4 plus 3 plus 2, or 2 plus 3, or 3 plus 2 plus 4, and so on. You can mix the numbers up. you're always going to get the same answer. And so what we're going to do, we're going to use commutative property to kind of group all the positive numbers and group all of the negative numbers. So, you could use colors or draw underlines or whatever. I'm going to look at 27. I don't have a symbol here, positive or negative. I can assume that's a positive. This is a positive, and this is a positive. And then the -4, that's a negative, obviously, and so is the -9. Okay. So I'm just going to group them according to their sign. So 27 plus 13 plus 5. And now I need to continue with the negative. So I've got -4 plus -9. So we reordered. Okay, that's basically what commutative property is about. I think I spelled that wrong. Let me rewrite that. So C-O-M-M, commutative. I apologize. Don't want to give you false information. Now the second property we're going to use is called associative property of addition. And that is going to relate, basically when you're doing associative property, you're using grouping symbols, so like parentheses, or you could use brackets. Okay, so we're grouping. And with addition, and it's also true for multiplication, you can group different parts of the problem together and still get the right answer. So, I'm going to group all my positives by putting a parentheses around my positives. And then I'm going to group my negatives, and in this case I'm going to put a bracket, 2 brackets. Okay, so basically brackets are the same thing as parentheses. Now, instead of solving the whole thing, I'm just going to solve this addition problem first. Then I'm going to solve this addition problem, and then I'll solve the last addition problem. So 27 plus 13 plus 5. So 7 plus 3 is 10, plus 5 is 15. Carry the 1. So it's 3, 4, looks like 45. Okay. Now -4 plus a -9 is going to give me -13. Whoops, -13. Again, I've got a positive plus a negative. So we know that when we have a positive plus a negative, we're going to subtract. And the answer will take the sign of the larger number. Okay, so let's take 45 minus 13, 12, looks like 32. Now notice 45 is larger than 13, so my answer is a positive 32. Anyway, in class we're going to do some more examples, and of course the homework will have some examples for you as well. So hopefully you get enough practice. But if you're still confused by this at the end of the week, let me know, and I'll make up some more problems for you. And there we go.